We're continuing talking about conditions of purification. Now we're talking about water, whether it's filthy or it's not filthy. We should start right here. The author says, if the water were a little amount, i.e. less than 2 qullas. 2 qullas is the amount of water contained in a cubic container. Cubic container, yani a cube, a box, a square, with the dimensions of 1.25 cubits in length, width, and depth. So he said a cubit is from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger of an average man's arm. So imagine something that much. You can envision that, such a container. Wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Then it is a condition in order for the purification with this water to be valid. So it's a little bit of water, less than 2 qullas. For this water to be valid to use for purification, it's a condition that it does not come in contact with najis filth. That's not exempted. Najis filth, that's not exempted. Not excused. Filth that's not excused. That means effective filth. Effective filth. That means contaminating filth. Some people here, they get confused or they get their words mixed up. So when something is exempted filth, they say it's not filth. That's wrong. It is filth. It's najis, but it's exempted, it's excused. So if you were to say, what's the point of it being filth if it's even exempted, yani? If it is filth and it's exempted, what's the point of it being filth? Or if it's not contaminating something, why would it be filth? Why would we consider it's filth? The answer is that because you can't eat it. You cannot eat it. You can't consume it. Because najis is something that's haram to eat. Some scholars define najis as something that prevents prayer. They said najis is a repulsive material that prevents the validity of prayer. I'm not defining it this way for you. Najis is something that's haram to eat it under normal circumstances. And there's other things that you can't eat also, so I'm not going to go into those details unless it comes up for us, inshallah. So it's still najis, just not contaminating najis. That means it's excused or pardoned or overlooked because the water becomes impure through this contact because it's a little bit of water. So when it contacted najis, that is, when the najis comes in contact with it, when the najis comes upon it, it will become filthy, this little bit of water. What if it comes upon the najis? We'll talk about it, inshallah. Then it possibly could stay pure. So there's a detail. If the najis comes upon the water or if the water comes upon the najis. We're talking about a little bit of water. And we're talking about contaminating filth, not excused. If it comes upon a little bit of water, it will contaminate the water, even if the water doesn't change. But if the water comes upon the najis, it might not become contaminated. What pours off of the spot might not become contaminated. So there's a detail there. We'll come to it, inshallah. So that detail, though, is important for you to understand what he said right here. He says, then it is a condition in order for the purification with this water to be valid, that it does not come in contact with najis filth that's not exempted. Because that part right there, come in contact, that depends. If you don't have the detail I'm telling you now, then you're just going to think whether the najis came upon the water Or the water came upon the najis, that's going to be najasa, that water, because it was a little bit. That's not the case. There's necessarily, Yani. It's not the case necessarily. In the case of pouring the water over it. Because the water becomes impure through this contact, which is if it comes upon the water. And sometimes when the water comes upon it. However, if the water comes in contact with an exempted impurity, meaning an exempted impurity came in contact with the water, came upon the water, like an insect that does not possess flowing blood, dies in the water. Sheikh Zakaria Al-Ansari said it this way, without saying, if you cut it or pull its limb. So sometimes they add that. If you cut this creature or pull its limb, it does not have flowing blood. And sometimes they don't say, if you cut it or pull its limb. They just say, it doesn't have flowing blood. That's the important part. It doesn't have flowing blood, not this word insect. When we say it doesn't have flowing blood, that means that that's its normal case. As opposed to something that lost its blood. It has flowing blood, but it doesn't have any blood in it. I'm not talking about that. So it says here, insect. I'm not sure what's the Arabic word. Maybe hashara. Because insects implies 6 legs. That's what's commonly understood from it. I'm not saying that's the original meaning of the word in language, or what's the origin of this word, insect. But they say 6-legged. 6-legged, as opposed to a spider or a centipede or something else. So it says, like if an insect that does not possess flowing blood dies in the water, because when it's dead, it's najis. But when it died in the water, it was an excused najis, because it's difficult to keep such a thing out of the water. You would come to your water and find something in there. If you could have kept it out of there, you would have kept it out of there, for example. So it's overlooked. It doesn't contaminate this water. Like that's your cup of water. You can just take it out and drink the water. No problem. It's not haram. Or it dies before falling into the water and then is thrown in. Yani, it fell in. Or was thrown in by the wind. That's like saying it fell in. Just not thrown in by you or someone on purpose. Thrown in by the wind, for instance. Provided no change occurs in both cases. Yani, as long as this creature that fell into the water doesn't change the water, then the water is not rendered impure. It is also a condition in order for the purification with this water to be valid. Looks like there's extra space here, which is counted as a typo. It is also a condition in order for the purification with this water to be valid that this small amount of water has not been used. Here. Has not been used. If you want to say it in brief words, you can stop right there. Hasn't been used. So the water can't have changed and it can't be used. 2 things. We talked about what it means for the water to change, which here, when we talk about the water changing, we have a range because this is between 2 things. Something pure or something filthy. Let's start from the filthy part. If water changed by something filthy, then the water is filthy. Doesn't matter how much water it is. If something filthy got in the water, but it's a lot of water that didn't change, then you can still use this water. Or if it's a little bit of water, it will be filthy even if it doesn't change. Now, if what got in the water is not filthy, then you look. Is it something that's easily kept out of the water? If it's not, then it's overlooked. As long as you still call that liquid water. We're not talking about if you want to drink it or not. We're talking about for purification purposes. If it is something that's easily kept out of the water, then if the water only changed a little bit by it, then you can still use it. And if the water changed drastically by it, so much that you don't call it water anymore, then you can't use it. So can you explain again what is meant by it does not come in contact with najis filth that is not exempted? Yes. If you have a small amount of water and it came in contact with najis filth that's not exempted, because filth might be exempted or not exempted. So what this mean is not exempted. Not exempted means it contaminates. It's a contaminating filth. It's an effective filth. Because if it were not a contaminating filth, it's overlooked. It's pardoned. The water contaminating the water contacting the filth. What does that mean? Those words right there like that, that covers two things. That covers to say the water came in contact with filth. That covers the filth coming upon the water, and it covers the water coming upon the filth. If you just say comes in contact with filth, the water comes in contact with filth. But these two cases are not always the same. In the first case, which is when the filth comes in contact with a small amount of water, contaminating filth comes in contact with a small amount of water, then it will contaminate the water even if the water doesn't change. But if it's the case that the small amount of water is coming over the filth, it's not necessarily that this water that runs off of the spot is going to be contaminated. It might be or it might not be. So there's detail there that inshallah will come. That's clear? Yes, not exempted means contaminating filth. Not exempted means effective. Not exempted means effective filth. And if effective filth means contaminating filth. But if you want to go to the word effective, that's a good word for a reason. Because we not only talk about water. Like, what if you are praying and while you're praying, you got hit in the head with a rock and you started bleeding. The blood is najis. And then it runs down you. This will not invalidate your prayer. Why? Because it's exempted. Exempted. What does exempted mean here? Exempted means it's not effective. It's not invalidating your prayer. Not effective. So sometimes the najasa is exempted for the water. That's what we're reading right now. Sometimes the najasa is exempted for the body. That's like what I just told you right now. And sometimes the najasa is exempted in the place, like the floor, with details, like a dirt road that you can't avoid it. It's right there. What are you going to do? You can't fly, or the likes. All right. So Now let me back up and repeat. It is also a condition in order for the purification with this water to be valid, that this small amount of water has not been used. So I'm saying to you, there's two cases. The water can't be changed and the water can't be used. So change, we just talked about it. And I just ran through for you spectrum. Now we want to talk about being used. I cut the author's sentence short. Has not been used, period. Because that's broad. But then that breaks into cases. So when you learn fiqh, how do you become good in fiqh? You have to be able to follow the branches. When the cases diverge, you need to be able to diverge with them and not mix them. So here, and the water has not been used. That breaks into two cases, because you might use it for lifting the hadath, and you might use it for lifting the najas. So the author continued on. He said, has not been used to remove major or minor ritual impurity. Unlike the water used for the second or third wash and the like. Yani, when you make wudu and you wash 3 times, an obligatory wudu, the first time is the one that took the impurity out of your organ. What happened was that your organ was impure and the water had purifying power. Then you applied the water to the organ with an intention, and then the water takes the impurity out of your organ, and your organ takes the purity from the water and becomes pure. And then when that water falls from your organ, it's now called musta'mal, used. So you can't use that because it's used. Used, it starts being used when it drips from the organ. But what about the second wash? The second wash is not lifting an impurity because you already lifted it. So this one is not called used. You just used it for a second wash, but it's not called here used because it retains its purifying power because you already used it. You already removed the impurity. Not you already used it. You already removed the impurity. So this water has to not have been used to remove a major or minor ritual impurity. That means not for ghusl or for wudu, obligatory one. Like the second or third wash and the like. It remains purifying. And the like, that's like if you refresh your wudu. You never even broke your wudu in the first place, but you've prayed. Now it's sunnah for you, before you pray again, to make a new wudu, even without breaking the first one. So the water that falls from this, even the first wash, is not used. Or if you took a sunnah ghusl for Jumu'ah, you didn't have to take this ghusl. You were already pure from big impurity. So that's not used water, what drips off of you. It remains purifying. It is also a condition that the small amount of water has not been used to remove najis, filth. Yes, the Shaykh is going to give us a detail though. Because how are you going to use it to remove najis, filth? You might put the najis into the water, or you might put the water over the najis. However, if the water was neither changed by the najis it removed, nor increased in weight because of it, then it is pure, but not purifying. And the meaning here is that you poured the water over it, even though it's not stated here. Without saying you poured the water over it, it's necessary that that's the case. That's the only scenario being meant here. Because if you put najasa into a small amount of water, then you will contaminate the water. even if it doesn't change. So we must be talking about here pouring the water over the najis. So how is it worded here? It says, however, if the water was neither changed by the najis it removed, so maybe someone might imagine, he put the najis into the water and then he removed the najis from this plate, let's say, nor it increased in weight because of it, the water didn't get heavier and the water didn't change, then it is pure but not purifying. Not in this scenario, because this is a scenario I'm telling you, you put the najis into the water. It would be najasa. So this is the case in particular, without him saying it, that you poured the water over the najis. Then you poured the water over the najis. And now, what's the judgment of the water that runs off of the spot? The answer is the judgment of the water is the judgment of the spot. As long as, yani, so that means, in other words, if the spot is najis, then the water is najis. Meaning, let's say you have a spot on your table of najasa. So you poured water over the spot. And then water ran off of the spot. The water itself didn't change, but the najasa is still there. So what's the judgment of the water? It's najis. Because the judgment of the water is the judgment of the spot. The najis is still there, then the water that ran off of it is najis. So if you pour water over that spot and then the water ran, what's the judgment of that water? What's the judgment of the spot? Is the najasa gone? Then the water is pure. That's it? That easy? Yeah, as long as, what Shaykh says right here, as long as the water didn't change by the najis that it removed. And as long as it didn't increase in weight, the water didn't become heavier, then it is pure but not purifying. How could you tell the water got heavier though? And there might be a way. There might be a way. Here, the author wants to start talking about tayammum. I will want to save tayammum for next week. So we'll stop here then, inshallah ta'ala. Do you have any question I can answer for you? Amin wa fikum.
Shaykh?
Yes.
Question around the jasa of the dog, for example.
Okay.
Where someone says this person owns a dog, and they said, I don't shake hands with them because chances are their dog would lick their hands and then they want to come and shake my hand. Is there such thing like that where the jasa transfers that way?
This is not the proper procedure, let's put it this way.
Okay.
Because the rule is that if you don't have any evidence that something is contaminated, then you don't judge it as contaminated. That's it. So it's that simple. If the person follows that rule, which is the right rule, then this person's life will be easier.
Makes sense. Barakallahu feek.
Amin wa fikum. You said, do I recommend studying Maliki and Shafi'i fiqh together? No, not without starting with one of them first. Studying both of them together is advanced. It has to start with one of them first. You said, can you define, I think you're saying the hadath. Hadath, yes, the hadath is the religious impurity. And religious impurity means a judgment in the organs that's known by religion. It's not physical. A religious judgment of the organs that we're going to call it hadath, impurity. Excuse me. So that's hadath. Uh, Hadath, Hadath. Hadath, but the first one is a ha, the hard one. Has the same letters as hadith. Hadath, but there's no extension. Hadath. You're welcome. You say, is it permissible to follow rulings from different madhabs for ease? Yes, it is. In the first place, it's not obligatory to follow one scholar in particular because he's not the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam. Who's the one you have to take everything he says? You can't even doubt about it in the first place. It's the Prophet himself, alayhi salatu wassalam. When the qualified mujtahid tells you the judgment is this, and another one tells you the judgment is this, then you can take either way. Neither of them is the Prophet, but either of them you're allowed to take his saying. You said, what are some examples of an insect that doesn't possess flowing blood? All of them. I don't know one that has flowing blood. He says, is it valid to switch up ruling whenever one feels like it? Yes. Yani. Not though if the Muslim judge ruled on you a rule that you have to do, then you have to do what the judge told you. They say the verdict of the judge supersedes ijtihad. Yani, this means, or it supersedes the taqleed, the following of the madhabs. So that judge might have been a Maliki or a Hanafi or whatever, or he gave you a Maliki rule or a Hanafi rule or whatever. But for you in particular, he told you this is what you're going to do, then you have to do it. Otherwise, you can follow any madhab. Aisha said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whenever he was given the choice between two things, he would choose the easier one. That's a proof. Yani, I'm zeroing in on the word of your question. Whenever he feels like it, he doesn't have a condition. You don't have a condition that you have to follow a Shafi'i or else you're sinful. Or Malik or Ahmed. No. Some people don't like when another person does that. Like he says to him, you change to the other method, but that's easier saying. Yeah. So what are you playing with your religion? No. I'm not playing with my religion, practicing my religion. This is the same. So he would say, no, you can't do it just to take what's easier. Actually, yes, you can. Just because it's easier, yes, you can. He said, is playing the flute or listening to a flute being played halal? No, neither of those is halal. Barakallahu feekum. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات. You said, I've heard someone use the hadith about the flute of Dawood as a proof of its validity. I don't have details for this talk here, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said there are two sounds that are damned. The wailing at the time of the calamity and the flute at the time of the party or the happy time. The wailing at the time of the calamity and the flute at the happy time. Amin wa iyyakum. Mizmarun inda ni'mah. Flute or pipe, if you want. Mizmar, a pipe at a happy time. He says making beats for drill music halal. If it's not wind instruments and string instruments, then the sounds are not haram. Wind instruments and string instruments are haram. Not wind or string instruments is not haram. Yani, percussion is not haram. And voices are not haram. And some sounds that are not from wind or string instruments, it's not haram. Which these days they can make a lot of sounds because of electrical machines. Electrical machines can generate sounds that are not wind or string sounds. That's not haram. You said if the lyrics are haram, does the beats become haram? No, the beat's not going to be haram. Yeah, and you don't mix. You're not going to mix things. If the beat's not haram, it's not haram. If the lyrics are haram, they are haram. If the beat's haram, the beat's haram. If the lyrics are not haram, the lyrics are not haram. Most of your music, Western music, that is from before 2000s, mostly haram. Not always though. Then since like 2000, more stuff became not haram for using other types of sounds. Even into the 80s and the 90s, they were still using a lot of instruments, haram instruments. Of course, they still use haram instruments. I'm not even claiming that they don't, but they use a lot more now. Machines. You said if an instrument is not a wind or string one, but the sound gives euphoria, is it haram? If it gives euphoria by itself, that means without being mixed with another instrument. When it gives euphoria by itself, then it's haram. Even if it's not a wind or string instrument. So really, the real rule goes back to the euphoria. When we say wind and string instruments are haram, that's an approximation, because that's mostly what's going to cause euphoria. The real thing goes back to the euphoria itself. Meaning, when this sound generating instrument causes euphoria without being blended with other sounds or with other instruments. So easy example is a drum. A drum does not cause euphoria by itself. Is euphoria the same as ecstasy? Yeah, approximately. Enchantment. It's enchanting. That's something that taps your soul, that euphoria or that enchantment. MashaAllah. So, based on that, then, a bugle is not haram because it's not enchanting. That's what the soldiers and scouts use to rally the troops or to wake up the brigade, for example, wake up the barracks. This horn that they blow, that's not haram. Tayyib. CBD without THC, I don't know. Yeah, even though it's wind instrument, yeah, that's why I mentioned it for you specifically, because it's not enchanting. The reason for it to be haram doesn't exist in it. It's not enchanting. What is it? Do you know what it is? What does it cause if it doesn't cause enchantment? It causes annoyance. It's annoying. It's abrasive. Yeah, it's like a coach whistle. You said bagpipes. As far as I know, bagpipes haram. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard. I didn't ask specifically about the bagpipe. I just learned the rule, and I know what bagpipes sound like. Then that's that's most likely is haram. Yeah, we're saying coach whistle is doesn't have the reason to be haram. It doesn't cause euphoria. I haven't heard of a judgment about using the coach whistle. What's the judgment of using the coach whistle? I haven't heard, but it's not a haram instrument. It's not one of those. Does it have another judgment though? I haven't heard. Is selling marijuana haram? Selling narcotics to drug abusers is haram. It's clear. So a person using it for recreation is haram. Yeah, that's drug abuse. MashaAllah. Amin wa iyaakum.